Hello, welcome to this podcast in which budding roving reporter Maxcine Kater talks with early career scientist and environmental writer Rio Button. Rio will speak at the New Voices for Africa Tipping Points webinar on Thursday, June 22nd, alongside Nox Ntshaba, Raynold Mangundu, and Karabo Makoena. The webinar will mark the end of the pilot phase of the new narratives learning series prepared by the Roving Reporters. My name is Steve Mokaya, and on behalf of the Roving Reporters and Maxcine, I welcome you to this inspiring podcast. Welcome.
Hi everyone, I am Maxcine Kater, a lead writer on Roving Reporters' new narratives training project. Today I'll be talking to the conservation scientist Rio Button, who is an ambassador for WESA's Young Reporters for the Environment. She's also the winner of the Roving Reporters inaugural Young Environmental Journalist of the Year award in 2021. She's also a featured panelist on the next Tipping Points webinar, which will be on the 22nd of June, which focuses on New Voices for Africa, young environmentalists sharing their ideas. So with this Tipping Point series, it happens monthly and it's organized by the Oppenheimer Generations Research and Conservation. And it puts together thought leaders, researchers, conservationists to address key questions on Africa's future and how best to address varying challenges such as conservation, environmental degradation, and also the effects of climate change. So Ria, I know this must be really exciting for you. So what led you in taking part in this Tipping Points webinar? If you could share some of that with us, please.
Thanks so much for having me, Maxine, and I'm really excited to be interviewed by you. So I started out for Roving Reporters and I covered quite a lot of the Tipping Points webinars, and they turned into articles. And at the end of their last conference, I did an online interview with Duncan Farland, who's like their Oppenheimer's head of research and conservation. And then last month they approached me to talk at this webinar, and I'm quite excited.
So what is the value of early career scientists, because you come from a scientific background?
It's so important to be able to communicate effectively with decision makers in an age of so much misinformation and so many people telling like passionate stories that aren't grounded in science, and sometimes they mislead the public, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not intentionally. And I just think being able to speak as a scientist and communicate what you understand in a way that everybody can understand it is so important for advocating for evidence-based decision making. And what's so great about Roving Reporters is that they really encourage you to nest that scientific understanding within narrative and feature writing. And I think that's just such an effective way of getting people's attention and then explaining the complexities behind it.
Wow, well said. Since you mentioned Roving Reporters, you worked with them for quite some time. Are there any challenges you experienced when you first started writing stories for Roving Reporters?
Roving Reporters was super great. They were so patient, and the mentoring that I got from Fred and Matt has just helped me so much. Initially, I was really insecure in my writing. I'm dyslexic. Learning to read and write took a really long time. I think I started reading in grade 4. So it's just something I wasn't really confident in sharing what I was writing. And they really helped me with that. They were really patient and built up my confidence. Being perfect is like the enemy of done. And because writing is such a creative thing in the beginning especially, I just never felt like my stuff was done. I just kept restructuring and changing words and sentences, and you can only do that up until a point, and then it just, your article actually isn't getting any better. You're just changing it, and then hopefully I'm getting better at it.
Okay, for me personally, working with you and watching you work, I've always been inspired by the way you write. I'd even use some of your templates. I'd be like, okay, Rio, so let me just try and mirror my article like that. And if you could just share some key points that you learned from the lead writing coach at Roving Reporters, which is Matthew.
Oh, Matt is an absolute wordsmith, word magician, and flow. He's just so good at making things flow, because I'll have all these, I'll have a little bit of a narrative that I want, and then I'll have all this science stuff, and I don't know how to smush it together. And he's so good at kind of helping you organize things into a way that it makes sense and flows nicely for the reader. And also that sort of nut graph summary paragraph sort of after a feature introduction, he's just really good at helping you condense that, and yeah, absolute word magician.
So how many stories have you actually published so far? And also if you could share some of your most challenging stories, because I know you've published and you've written a lot of work. And also some of the highlights. What were your biggest highlights as well?
Okay, so just before this, I double checked. I think I've written 11 articles for the Daily Maverick as the first author or only author. And then I got one in a Seychelles newspaper for Save Our Seas, and then there's been a couple of blogs and sort of spin-off articles in other publications, but the Daily Maverick ones were definitely the big ones that I'm sort of the most proud of. In terms of highlights, I know it sounds cliche, but working with Fred and Matt has been an absolute highlight. I've learned so much from them. That little push that it's not just me asking questions, I'm asking questions because I'm going to write about it, has given me the confidence to ask sometimes the difficult questions that put the person you're interviewing into a awkward space. But I mean, you try to put them in gently, but it gives you the courage to ask those difficult questions where you don't necessarily agree, or just play devil's advocate in an interview. Yeah. The most challenging is definitely, and I still haven't finished writing it, I started a piece on manta rays in Mozambique, and they've declined by 90%. Yeah, and I interviewed local law enforcement and local fishermen, and that was really a little bit scary. And setting up those meetings, and with getting people to translate for me and help me with the Portuguese, and
yes.
And that was it was really good, such a good learning experience. But it was kind of scary to meet law enforcement in a foreign country that doesn't necessarily like the press. I've got interviews with local fishermen who told me, they never admitted it was them, but they told me stories of exactly how people used to catch and kill manta rays, and yeah.
I cannot wait to read that story. So what tips or pearls of advice can you offer early career scientists such as myself?
If the point of what you're writing is to make somebody look good, but if you're not trying to make them look bad, or you don't think you're going to, when you start an interview, or even when you're setting up the interview, just say whatever I'm going to write, you can proofread before it's published. And that just has really helped me, especially with some of the researchers who were going to present at the Oppenheimer conference. They were quite a lot of scientists are quite cagey, and they're so used to the media trying to put them in a bad light, and they're so scared of negative coverage that they kind of cage up, and they're really rigid, and you just don't get much out of them. But if you can put their mind at ease that they're going to have the opportunity to read through stuff, check their exact facts and numbers and stuff, they relax, and they're much more likely to tell you colorful stories and more personal stuff, which really lends itself to you telling a story and catching people's attention with interesting quirks or little anecdotes that you wouldn't otherwise have seen if they thought they were on record and they were never going to have a chance to correct things.
Since the last time you reported for the Oppenheimer Research Conference for Roving Reporters, can you share some of the work you've been doing?
Yeah, I can. It's been a lot. I am still working on this project. We're setting up protected areas in Saudi Arabia and doing sort of ecosystem service analysis, and that's a really cool project. It's really exciting that Saudi Arabia is getting on board with trying to meet conservation targets. Actually, they're doing exceptionally well, but it's really exciting to be part of protecting more wild spaces. And then I just a month ago got back from Somaliland, where I worked as a camera assistant and commercial diver. They've just set up their first ever marine protected area. It's also Africa's newest marine protected area. And yeah, it was a super exciting project to be a part of. I've done a lot of modeling recently for how increasing ocean protection will impact fisheries. That's been cool. And then hopefully it'll be out really, really soon. There's a guide for the moths of Southern Africa, and I generated all the species distribution for like the 1,500 species in the book. Yeah, really looking forward to seeing that. I think field guides are such an incredible tool for everybody to sort of understand the science. Nobody really reads the species description papers, but it just makes science so much more accessible. And then lastly, I leave for Brisbane next week to start my PhD. So that's really exciting. A bit scary though, because love it here. Yeah, should be good.
Wow, you are, like I said, an inspiration. Wow. Rio, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. You are amazing. So thank you.
Many thanks for your company throughout this podcast. I hope you enjoyed and learned something from the podcast. I also hope to see you at the webinar, which will also be available in recorded form in case you missed the live session. See you. Until next time. Goodbye.